And all right, thanks. Good morning, everybody. 9:02. We'll go ahead and get our monthly breakfast started. Thanks all for joining. First item of business will be to introduce all the special people on the call who we will be hearing from during the course of the hour. Congressman Bobby Scott is on the call. Thank you, sir. Let's see. I know a lot of our delegates and senators had told him, let's see, Delegate Nancy Guy is on the call. Good morning. Team Scott, I don't know if that's Joni. How you doing? Former candidate Willie Randall has joined us. Jay Jones is getting on the call. And I know Joe Lindsey should be joining us, and I think possibly Steve Heretic and Senator Sproul. So since we got a lot of people to get to this morning, we'll just go ahead and get things rolling. I think most people are not going to need a lengthy introduction to our special guest speaker this morning, but you know, we all are familiar with General Herring, the first Democrat to win that office in 20 years, successfully re-elected to the office for the first time. That's happened in 30 years. And of course, before his wonderful work as our Attorney General, served as a state senator from Loudoun and also served on the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. And when he's not doing the people's business, he does private practice work up in his hometown of Leesburg. So with that as introduction, I will welcome General Herring. Please give us an update on everything that's happening, and then we'll go to some questions and answers.
Great, Charlie, thanks so much for the warm welcome. It's great to see all of you here, albeit virtually, and welcome to my kitchen in Leesburg. Congressman, it's great to be on the panel with you and good to see you again. And I just first of all like to start off and thank everyone for all the help and support you've given me over the years and for everything that you're doing to help make sure that Democrats are elected up and down the ballot year in and year out. Last year, you all delivered Democratic majorities in both the House of Delegates and the Senate, and helped make Eileen Fillercorn our speaker. And all of that work has made such an incredible difference for Virginia. This year is going to be no different, and we've got to work as hard as we can to re-elect our great Senator Mark Warner, our members of Congress, Bobby Scott, Elaine Luria, and I know that this audience needs no persuading, but I'll tell you, it really means a lot to have people like Mark and Bobby and Elaine working for us on some of the most important issues of the day. And I'm really glad to be here with you and give you a little bit of an update on some of the work that I'm doing on your behalf and behalf of all Virginians as Attorney General during this really unprecedented time. And you know, a moment ago, I mentioned about what a difference it made to have the Democratic majority in the General Assembly. And that new majority really represents a decades-long culmination, really, of a decades-long transformation and a landmark moment, an opportunity to build a Commonwealth where justice and equality and opportunity are real for all Virginians. And we all have a role to play in helping to build that kind of Virginia where that's truly guaranteed for everyone, whether you're, no matter what your background is, whether you're a worker, a business owner, public official, or citizen volunteer, we all have a role to play. And I've been really fortunate to have an enormous platform and set of tools to help improve the lives of our fellow Virginians, not just to be along for the ride for that transformation, but really to be able to help chart a course toward a more progressive future that works for all Virginians. And that's an opportunity as well as an obligation that I take really seriously. It's why I get up every single morning and work so hard to improve the lives of all Virginians. And that started as soon as I took into office, when I told the world we're not going to defend an unconstitutional and discriminatory ban on marriage for same-sex couples, we'd fight for marriage equality. Since then, we've taken really strong stands on behalf of new Virginians, making college education affordable for them and blocking President Trump's Muslim ban in the courts. We fought to protect your health care from the unending attacks by Donald Trump and Republican allies. We've taken on a lot of powerful allies like Big Pharma that helped to create and profit off the opioid epidemic. We've taken on industrial agriculture that wanted to pollute the Chesapeake Bay. We've taken on the gun lobby, who's fought tooth and nail against some of the simplest and most popular gun safety measures to stop gun violence. And every time when conventional wisdom said, the issue was too big or the opposition was too powerful, we forged ahead anyway, knowing that we were fighting for Virginians and that you had my back. And it has really made all the difference in the world. Of course, we know that the work is far from over, and my team and I have been incredibly busy doing a lot of work dealing with the pandemic, as well as non-COVID related business. I'll start with the work that has been related to the pandemic and the safety measures that Virginia has put in place in order to help keep Virginians and their families and their communities safe, have come under legal attack in state and federal courts around Virginia, actually around the country. And we have seen that where those safety measures are eased and pulled back too soon, or where those safety measures were challenged in court and overturned, that we've seen the virus come roaring back and spikes continue. And we have been in to defend all of those COVID mitigation measures in courts all around the state, in both state and federal courts. I think we have won 14 of them now. There's still more out there, and we're going to continue to defend them successfully. These measures have been proven effective ways to help keep you, your families, and our communities safer. And I am committed to doing everything I can to help protect Virginians and keep them safe during this pandemic. Now, even though there has been a mountain of unprecedented legal work dealing with the pandemic, that doesn't mean that all of the other work that we do has stopped, and far from it. We have continued to fight for Virginians in all kinds of ways. One of them, I was honored a week or two ago to announce that Virginia has eliminated the backlog of untested rape kits. When I came into office and I learned there was a backlog, that it had grown to nearly 3,000, I was shocked. And one untested kit is too many because it represents the trauma of a survivor, and we owe it to them to make sure that every kit is tested and that they know the results. And so it was a mammoth undertaking to identify every single kit and make sure that everyone was tested. So far, charges have been brought against one Spotsylvania man. And as these cases are re-examined with the new effort, we expect that there may be more cases brought around the state. And I can't tell you what this has meant to survivors in Virginia. I have heard from so many of them who have told me what it meant to them to know we were doing this. Even survivors whose perpetrator was identified and brought to justice and imprisoned. When they heard that we were doing this, it was very powerful to them, and it was helping them on a path to recovery. I even heard a case where someone stepped forward. It encouraged her to step forward and find out the results of her case and bring forward a case because of her kit. And I want to make sure that every Virginian knows that we are committed to eliminating sexual violence in Virginia. But when it does happen, that every survivor knows that they can feel comfortable coming forward, that they're going to be treated with compassion and respect, and that every single case is going to be important. And so we are going to continue that work. We have also invested in training and trauma-informed responses for everyone who's involved in the response. We have developed a tracking system so that healthcare providers, law enforcement, and survivors themselves can follow the status of their kit. And so I was honored to say that Virginia has now become the 7th state, just 6 others have done this. We're now the 7th state to eliminate that backlog, and it is never coming back. We've also been in court a lot recently in defending Virginia's new gun violence prevention laws. The gun lobby has, committed to doing everything they can to stop it. They've filed suit against the universal background check law, red flag, the 1 gun a month law that Governor Wilder got passed that served Virginia so well for 2 decades. But, even though they're filing suit in court, we are fighting back. We were successful in winning the case against the 1 gun a month law. And no matter what court the gun lobby goes into to challenge these laws, we are going to be in there to defend them, and we are going to win. The Virginia Values Act was, I was at a bill signing just a couple of weeks ago where Governor Northam signed into law the Virginia Values Act. That's so important, and within days of taking office, back in January of 2014, I began to dismantle the regressive, discriminatory policies of my predecessor, Ken Cuccinelli. He had told universities and schools that they could not protect their employees or their students from discrimination based on sexual orientation. I said, no, that's wrong. We need to protect people and protect students. We went into court, we defended marriage equality, we won, and now the Virginia Values Act is in place, and I'm really proud that Virginia has comprehensive protections for our LGBT community, and no Virginian should fear discrimination because of who they are, where they came from, what they look like, or whom they love. We've also been very active in the Supreme Court. We've had some great wins. Speaking of LGBT protections, we got a really good win a couple of weeks ago in a case that we had filed an amicus brief on, and it was that the court recognized that there are protections for the LGBTQ community against employment discrimination under Title VII. I had issued an opinion 4 years ago that said that was exactly the right result. And it made Republicans in Virginia go apoplectic. But now a Supreme Court has agreed with us, and those protections are now in place at a federal level as well. Another big win came when the court ruled against the Trump administration's effort to rescind DACA. I had filed suit against President Trump when he tried to rescind it. That case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. These are our kids. There are 12,000 of them in Virginia, and they contribute to our communities. They are as much a part of Virginia and America as anyone else, and I'm really glad that the Supreme Court rejected the Trump administration's effort to take those protections away. It was a historic win, and now he's trying to do it again, even though the Supreme Court told him he can't rescind it. And so if he does, be assured I will be there to stop him a second time. And speaking of trying to do things again, even after the Supreme Court tells him he can't, the Trump administration once again is trying to undermine and sabotage the census. You may remember a year or two ago, he tried to do that, and by inserting a citizenship question, which was unconstitutional. I filed suit to block it. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court recently ruled in our favor and said, no, the president can't do that. And having an accurate census is really important. It determines the distribution of hundreds of billions of dollars in federal spending. It determines the distribution and number of our congressional representatives. It is hugely important. And now he's trying to do it again by not counting populations, and that is wrong. And so we filed suit to block him, and if we have to, we'll take this one all the way up to Supreme Court as well. I recently also filed suit to stop the Trump administration from forcing our colleges and universities from having to have classes in person if they deem it unsafe. the president had tried to make them do that, or if they didn't, then he would deport all of the international students. And international students do contribute a lot to our universities and colleges in Virginia and around the country. So we sued to block that. And we had a hearing the day after we filed suit, and on an emergency hearing. And the Trump administration's lawyers came in and said, okay, we'll rescind the rule. So it just goes to show you, sometimes when you stand up to bullies, they back down. We also have the special session coming up, and I think because of the nationwide awakening that we've been seeing, we've got an opportunity now to really pass some criminal justice reform measures, things that I've been fighting for, and I know you all have been fighting for years. I'm hopeful that we'll be getting a lot of things passed in this special session. So I'm working with our senators and delegates to make that as effective as possible. One of the things, and I know the Congressman, if you're still on the line, I want to thank you for the legislation, the comprehensive criminal justice and police reform legislation that you all passed. Again, I'm not optimistic about a Mitch McConnell Senate, but one of the things that we had asked for, we as state attorneys general, and I was one, is authority to do pattern of practice investigations of departments that have a lot of excessive force cases to try to break down the systems and the policies that have allowed unconstitutional policing to occur. And in the absence of the Department of Justice doing those, I've asked for authority as Attorney General to do that. Congressman, you and your colleagues listened and put that in the comprehensive bill you passed. But again, I don't have a lot of confidence in the Mitch McConnell led Senate. And so I'm also asking legislators in the special session as a part of their criminal justice reform efforts to include that, so that communities in Virginia will know that that protection will be there for their communities. So as you can see, we have been really, really busy, and I have no intention of slowing down, but I want to thank you for the opportunity to give you an update on the things that we're working on. And with that, Charlie, I'll turn it back to you.
All right. Thank you very much. And as I said at the introduction, the office is doing great work for the people of Virginia. For those who aren't familiar, committee members, you can go down and raise your hand so I can unmute you if you have a question, or you can put it in the chat bar and we'll pull it up and ask it. I do want to confirm since then that Delegate Joe Lindsey has in fact got on the call, and the greatest treasure in the greatest city, Daun Hester, is on the call. So welcome. So with that said, first question, let me go to Carrie Buchanan. You can unmute yourself and fire away.
Yes. General Herring, I'd like to know where you stand on the constitutional amendment that's been proposed for the state on redistricting and the development of a nonpartisan or a citizen-led commission.
Yeah. You know, I've long thought that it was important for the voters to choose their representatives and not the other way around. And I do support nonpartisan redistricting. I know there was a lot of discussion about, given how it was written and proposed in the session, not this past session, but the one before, whether that's the best way to do it. There was a lot of discussion and debate in this session, and ultimately it passed. I'm hearing that there are growing concerns about whether that's the best way to do it. So, you know, the voters are going to be deciding that, and I'm going to continue to listen to the concerns that have been raised about whether that's the best approach or not. But ultimately, if that doesn't pass and the voters don't approve it, then I still think that we ought to make sure that it's done fairly, that communities are not broken up, and that the people are the ones who are choosing their representatives.
All right, Barbara Clear.
Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Barbara. It's good to hear your voice. I don't see you, but I can't see you, but it's good to hear your voice.
Right. Good to see you, even though it's online. A concern I have is the slowing down of the mail by the U.S. Post Office, and I'm afraid for November. And is your National Association of Attorneys General, especially the Democratic chapter, looking at doing anything to monitor this and perhaps take legal action if it appears the current Postmaster General may decide to close the post office for 2 weeks?
You know, it is hard to believe that the post office is. There we go. It's hard to believe that the Trump administration is attacking the post office, but that just shows you, you know, the state of affairs, and these are unprecedented times that we're in. We're absolutely looking closely at that, and we'll take whatever legal action. I don't want to speak for others, but we are looking at it closely, and I'm prepared to take whatever actions necessary to make sure that we have safe and fair voting, especially making sure that here in Virginia, we do everything we can to do that. There was a case that was filed recently, and we were able to reach a resolution where the witness requirement was not required, and I'm hopeful that that will be for absentee ballots. I'm hopeful that will be extended for the November election, and because no one should have to choose between their health on the one hand or voting on the other. So we need to make sure that the health concerns do not infringe on anyone's opportunity to vote. I hope that in the upcoming special session, there will be an effort to make sure that funding is in place so that the absentee ballots can be mailed without having to go to the post office and buy a stamp. I think that's going to be really important, and to make sure that everything that we do is focused on being able to vote safely. Voting by mail is one of the best ways to do that. And by the way, Virginia, you're able to apply for an absentee ballot already. You can't actually mail the ballot in yet. That has to wait until September. But I would encourage everyone to vote by mail, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that people can do so safely without having to get a witness to mail in their ballot. Hopefully there'll be money in the budget to pay for postage, so you won't have to worry about that either.
All right, yeah, that's the only thing that has me up at night, is thinking of, I think the people who are going to vote are going to overwhelmingly vote to elect Joe Biden. We just got to make sure that they get that ballot and get it done. I did have a question here from Eileen Wolf from the Sierra Club in the chat. She is concerned that Virginia has the 7th highest utility rates. Is there anything that can be done to lessen the burden on high electric rates for low-income Virginians?
Well, I am in court. I go to the State Corporation Commission when the utility companies come in and ask for a rate increase. I am in there to make sure that Virginians do not have to pay 1 penny more than they should for utilities. And we've been able to successfully get some refunds for some customers where utilities were overcharging. Unfortunately, too often, the legislature has prevented us from being able to do all the things that we could do to get rates reduced, where Dominion, I'm convinced, has been over-earning. That ability to hold them to no more than what's absolutely necessary was taken away for a period of time. And I was opposed to that because I think that no citizen, no Virginian should have to pay more for their utilities than absolutely necessary.
All right, Committee Treasurer Grant Deppen has a question.
Earlier you spoke about some of the criminal justice reforms that we're looking at for the special session. Is there anything specific, or is it kind of across the board from the legal components to the prison system to policing, or is it just kind of everything?
Well, there's certainly a lot to do, and for too long, Black Americans and communities of color have been policed differently. It is documented, it is undeniable, and we have a historic opportunity to make a lot of progress. I don't think everything's going to get done this session, of course. It's a special session, so it's very short, but there are things that we can do to make chokeholds illegal and reduce the opportunity for a warrantless or no-knock warrants, things like that. But I also, as I talked about, the pattern of practice investigations, I hope in the special session we'll be authorized to do those. That will be an important protection against unconstitutional policing for communities in Virginia. There are a lot of opportunities there that we need to make the most of, and opportunities for transparency to make sure that when there is an allegation of excessive force, that the investigation is done in a way that the public has confidence in. These are all things that I think are on the table for the upcoming special session, but I know that as much as I hope we will get done in August on this, that the work will continue and that more will be done in January when the General Assembly gets back.
Oh, how did I mute myself? Dave Davenport?
Thanks, Charlie. Attorney General Herring, I'm very impressed by everything you're doing. I just have a question about, can you update us on progress for the Citizens United Amendment, where all that is for Virginia?
Well, Citizens United was a real setback in trying to bring more transparency to campaign funding and where the money's coming from. I think it needs to be reversed or overturned. You know, getting a constitutional amendment is really tough if we want to overturn it that way. You know, one of the constitutional amendments we've been working on for a long time has been fighting for the ERA, and I'm so proud that Virginia finally put us over the top and was the 38th and final state to do it. But even so, the Trump administration is trying to fight that and told the archivist not to certify that it's now part of the Constitution. So we're filing suit over that, and we do need to reverse that decision. It's a terrible setback for transparency and campaign finance and finance reform.
Yeah, absolutely. Willie Randall, let me get you unmuted. Former candidate in the Senate 6th and 100th House.
Thank you. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Willie.
My
Great to see you again.
Yes, same here. We know the unemployment benefits are actually going to go away today, that $600 that most of the people have been getting. You know, there are a lot of folks that I come across that have problems paying their rent in the state. And what I would like to know is, what are we doing to make sure that those folks that are going to lose that benefit potentially be kicked out of their place because they can't pay the rent? I know we had a moratorium on at one point, but what are we doing now to protect those people?
Yeah, that is a really good question. You know, not obviously the health crisis has led to an economic crisis, and the people who are hurt the most are often hourly wage earners, low-income Virginians, and so many of them have lost their jobs. We're seeing record unemployment, and I can't imagine what that must feel like to say you're a couple with 2 children, you're both out of work, the rent is due, and unemployment benefits are gone, and you can't pay the rent. And I can't imagine how scary that would be. I was really disappointed to see that Senate has blocked efforts to continue the unemployment benefits, but in Virginia, we're trying to do what we can to help protect people who are in that situation. There was a judicial emergency that temporarily blocked the evictions. A group of legislators, many, I think some are on this call, had asked me for an opinion on what measures were there to protect people who couldn't pay their rent because of COVID. There were a lot of protections in place depending on their circumstances that would go through August. The governor has asked the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court to extend that judicial emergency. And I'm hopeful that when the General Assembly comes back, they will be able to do some things that will give us some additional protections. And I'm going to do everything I can to support them in that effort.
All right. Just to make sure we leave plenty of time on the calendar for Congressman Scott and our other elected officials. If we could do 2 quick questions, I'm going to turn it over to Tim Rothgrab on the committee. But I do have one question, if you can briefly touch on it, as to the waterways. What's being done to protect the waterways from the Mountain Valley pipeline?
Well, I've been very concerned about both the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and Mountain Valley Pipeline. In the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, there was, their permits have been challenged in court. It went up to the Supreme Court. And on behalf of Virginia, I filed an amicus brief calling into question the need for the pipelines and the serious harm that can result from them. And ultimately, even though the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the pipeline, Dominion announced that they were not going to go forward with it anymore. The Mountain Valley Pipeline, at this point, as far as I know, the developers are still moving forward with it. There have been a lot of erosion and sediment control violations. I filed suit against them, and even though we got millions of dollars in fines and penalties paid, it's still something that is of a concern to me. I know it is to a lot of residents and people who live near the pipeline, and actually all over the state, people are concerned about it. So we will continue to monitor that closely. The DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, is the one that issues the violations. And then if they start piling up again and they're not doing what they're supposed to do, I won't hesitate to sue them again.
All right, thank you. And again, last question, Tim Rothgeb, if we could get it quick.
Thanks, Charlie. I'm concerned about voting this November, and I was wondering if you have any plans regarding like Trump deploying troops to protect the polls or deploying troops to seize the ballots, to protect the ballots, any of these dirty tricks that he may pull to basically overturn the election.
It's protection of the election is hugely important. We know this. The last 3.5 years have been really tough for Americans under the Trump administration, and we have to do everything we can to get Joe Biden elected. I am absolutely looking at all kinds of ways that we think the Trump administration might try to interfere. We need to make sure that people can vote safely and that they're not intimidated. That kind of election interference has no place in Virginia or in our country. And I'm as concerned about it as you are. And I'm going to do everything I can as Attorney General to make sure that the will of Virginians is honored and respected. And we've got to do everything we can. And since this is the last question, I'll just kind of close it out on that and say, we have to get out and I know it's a difficult and challenging time that we're in, and we have to be creative about how to reach voters and communicate with them and to make sure that people are able to get out or vote safely. And We have got to get the criminal enterprise that is currently occupying the White House and the Trump administration out, elect Joe Biden. We need to reelect our great Senator Mark Warner. We need to reelect Bobby Scott. We need to reelect Elaine Luria. We need to reelect my own Congresswoman, Jennifer Wexton, and Abigail Spanberger, and our Democratic delegation, and expand those numbers so that we can get things turned around again.
All right. Well, General Herring, thank you for the work you're doing on behalf of the Commonwealth of Virginia. You are a great Attorney General, and thank you so much for spending this 30, 40 minutes with us. And I tell you, I'm going to turn it over to Congressman Scott. If you wanted to stick around just for fun, we're going to have a vice presidential preference poll if you wanted to participate in it. And we'll see how that turns out at the end. But again, thank you very, very much, General Herring, for joining us.
Well, thank you, Charlie. It's great to be back. And again, thank you all for all of your help and support over the years and for everything you're doing to help Democrats get elected.
Thank you, sir. And Andria McClellan, City Council, jumped on the call. And with that said, Congressman Scott.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlie. And thank you, General Herring, for your good work and all the good work in the Attorney General's office. You've been ahead of the game, and congratulations on all your successes. You've also shown what happens when you can take over the firearm, gun safety, the minimum wage, voting rights, all passed. We couldn't get them out of subcommittee last year. So it shows the importance of voting. I want to remind people that on the constitutional amendment, the Democratic Convention had a resolution that passed and that was adopted in opposition of the reapportionment constitutional amendment. It gives two House the legislators. It's not a citizen commission because it's packed with legislators. It gives two legislators in the House the ability to veto a plan, even if 14 other members approve it, and send it to the Republican-controlled Supreme Court. I think that glitch assumes good faith negotiation, which in my experience cannot be assumed. They could come into a meeting, say, here's our plan. If you don't like it, the Supreme Court's going to draft it and walk out, and that's the end of the proceedings. So I think we need to really start that over from scratch. Most of the discussion in Washington now is on the HEROES Act, extending the provisions of the CARES Act. We heard a question on the $600. Let me tell you, the Republicans don't care about health care. If you lose your job, you've lost your health insurance. And how are you going to pay for your health insurance premiums without help with that $600? For a lot of people, if you're the median wage of about $1,000 a week, $50,000 a year, the maximum unemployment compensation in Virginia is $300 and some. So you're nowhere close to being able to pay rent if we don't extend the $600. Some people might make a little more, but they're struggling paying rent. And if you don't give them the $600, you're gonna have more people in court getting evicted. And doing that during high unemployment and in the middle of a pandemic is just unconscionable. The major difference in the House and Senate bill is not the $600, it's a state and local funding. The House bill has almost $1 trillion in support for state and local funding. The Senate bill has zero. Without the state and local funding to make up for revenue shortfalls, everything else in the bill is essentially a waste of time. Education money they've got in the bill will not cover the cuts in education that will be coming when state and local have to balance their budget. It's going to be a total disaster in terms of public safety and education, trying to maintain those if we don't come forth with state and local funding. That's $1 trillion. Their whole bill is $1 trillion. So they haven't even started. And furthermore, they haven't started anyway because they don't have a bill that they can get support on. Charlie, they don't have 51 votes on their proposal.
Right.
And so they come up, McConnell comes forth with a proposal, as they say, without portfolio, without the votes to pass it, and wants Nancy Pelosi to negotiate against herself. No, come up with something that you can actually, that's actually real, that has state and local in it, that has the $600 and has many of the other things, education funding, so that we can make some progress. But I don't see, unless they're willing to at least double the size of their bill, I don't see that they have a credible package that can pass the Senate, much less pass the House.
Yeah, and of course the being blamed on do-nothing Democrats, which is an amazing. They have no shame in their messaging, but I guess they do it because it works.
Well, when the governors and mayors and school board members tell those Republican senators that when we have to cut the school board budgets and cut everything else, we're not going to cover for you, we're going to blame you.
Yeah.
Then I think enough of the senators, particularly those running for re-election, might get the word.
All right. Any questions for the Congressman? Well, by the way, condolences to America, I guess, on the passing of Congressman Lewis. I watched all the services, and Black Caucus was very prominent, most of them, and we saw you there every step along the way.
Well, there's one thing that if you look at his life experience, if you look at where America was when he crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge to where we are now in terms of the number of people that can vote. And he always believed that voting was the answer. And it certainly made a difference. And he transformed from the protest to Atlanta City Council and into Congress to make the changes from the inside after the vote was secured. It's a remarkable life. He made a remarkable difference.
Right. Amen. Amen. Tim Rothgeb, a question for the Congressman?
Charlie.
Yep.
Hi, it's Betty.
Hey, Betty.
I have a question for the Congressman. I watched some of the hearing on yesterday with the COVID, and a lot of the discussion centered around reopening the schools. And most of the Republican congressman basically was placing that responsibility on the state. And it was kind of a back and forth with the money coming from the federal government versus, and the federal government was saying that the money is there for the states to reopen. And so how is this going to end up? I know that's been a really hot topic these past few weeks with children going back to school virtually or some in person. So how does the federal government play? What's the role of the federal government?
The federal government in the House, we have money for state and local governments to backfill their budgets. And you can see in Virginia what happened after the General Assembly ended and pandemic started in the veto session. We lost the teacher raises, counselors in the schools. Norfolk State lost $135 million in construction, money for community colleges. All of that had to be cut because of revenue shortfalls. If you don't have money to cover that, then education is going to be severely cut, and anything in your budget is just partially going to offset that. We have money for state and local, and money for schools. The Senate says they have more money. They have numerically about the same as what we have, except they don't have any state and local. They use 30 billion. They have higher education. When you get to the K through 12, 10 billion goes to private schools, and half the money you only get if you open. Well, some schools have to spend a lot of money in order to open, so you got a chicken and egg situation. You can't get the money you need to open until you open. You can't open until you've got the money. So they're not going to get the money. And the little money that's left will pale in consideration with what gets cut. The GAO just last month issued a report that showed 40% of the school districts in this country need to significantly repair or replace half of their ventilation systems, the HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. The CDC said if you don't have proper ventilation, you can't open, because they found that's why you can eat outside in a restaurant, not inside, because once people start breathing, the virus gets in the air. If you don't have proper ventilation, you got a problem. You can't fix these ventilation systems without money. We have money in the, we have $130 billion in school construction money in the infrastructure bill that you don't hear that as part of the education money, but $130 billion that they need to properly open. They need more money for transportation. If they've got half their kids in a bus, let's do a little arithmetic. You need twice as many buses. Do they have twice as many buses? How are you going to, you need new furniture arrangements for the classrooms. You need disinfectant, you need PPEs. Who is there? By the way, we had one witness said something about the Tennessee had bought disinfectant for every classroom in the school system in the state. Well, who's going to do the disinfectant? Others now we're going to have more custodians, or we just tell the teachers stop doing lesson plans and start doing custodial work. We know we make them get the supplies, but we're going to make them buy their own masks. I mean, it costs money to reopen. And unless they have the money, and that's why we have it in the HEROES bill. We have the state and local, we have the HEROES bill, and we have the construction money. So they can probably open safely unless there's a pandemic outside. There's no way you can send in a high school 2,000 students out into the community where there's a pandemic and have them come back the next day and think nobody's going to be infected. And once somebody gets infected, you know, what's going to happen? The problem with this disease is people are contagious without knowing it. And unless you have significant testing, and who's going to pay for the test? Unless you have significant testing, you don't know. I would assume you're going to test everybody on day one. And then recurring tests to make sure there's no outbreak going on. They had a meatpacking plant where 3 people showed symptoms. They tested everybody. Hundreds of people tested positive, were contagious, spreading the disease all over the hundreds. So if we wait for somebody to show symptoms, it's too late. And how are you going to deal with that? And then if somebody's showing symptoms, who's going to make the diagnosis? Are we going to have nurses in the schools, or teachers now going to be physicians making the oh yes, this is just a sniffle, he's all right. Oh no, he might have COVID-19. Who's going to make that diagnosis? That takes money. And unless you can come up with it, and we have sufficient money in the HEROES Act. The Senate doesn't have the state and local money, and they have insufficient money for education and no money for construction. So we're miles away on that, but hopefully the Senate will come to its senses and come a lot closer to the HEROES Act than they are now.
All right. Thank you, Congressman. And before we move it over to our House of Delegates members for some of their work, if you get a chance to make a pitch, the cookout goes on, COVID or not.
We're sending out a notice in the next couple of days. Save the date, Labor Day, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We're still having the cookout virtual. It'll be on Zoom. So, but we're going to still have it.
Well, at least the lines for the hot dog will be shorter this year.
I hope so.
All right. Thank you,
Charlie.
Okay. Thank you, Congressman.
Charlie, before we leave, I just got one question for the Congressman.
Well, okay.
Did he leave?
No, he's there.
I just took on a new role as the grassroots coordinator for the state for my firm, and we represent about 300-400 offices around the state of Virginia. And one of the things that they're interested in is your committee that you chair, Wonder if you could just talk about your committee before we let you go.
The Education and Labor Committee has jurisdiction over education and labor. One of the primary initiatives that we have focused on is trying to make OSHA have an enforceable standard to protect workers from airborne infectious diseases like COVID-19. They have the authority to issue an emergency temporary standard that can be enforced to make sure that people are safe as possible from airborne infectious diseases. They don't do anything. They haven't done anything. They've got a little guidance here and there, but no enforceable standard. After the meatpacking plants, after you had all the problems there, no standard. After the nursing homes, no standard. In the hospitals, no standard. In the prisons, no standards. You'd like one in the schools when they open, so that the teachers are protected, and you can't protect the teachers without having a plan that protects the students, so everybody gets protected. When OSHA can come in and talk about how much ventilation you need, and what kind of disinfectant you need, what kind of PPEs you need, what kind of protection you need from the workers. Nothing. Thank Governor Northam, because he is Virginia's only state in the country with an enforceable OSHA standard to protect workers from airborne diseases. California has it for a couple of industries, but Virginia just a couple of weeks ago started the process and completed it to establish emergency temporary standards under Virginia OSHA that can be enforced to make sure that businesses do as much as they can to protect workers from diseases. And so you can thank Dr. Ralph Northam for pursuing that. But in terms of workplace safety, the ability to join unions, Fair Labor Standards Act, the minimum wage, obviously all the education, a lot of health care, because we have employer-based health care. We have jurisdiction over a whole lot of stuff. Yeah. So we look forward to working with you.
All right. Thank you, Congressman. I guess just a heads up, we are probably going to be running past 10 on this call. I apologize, but we got so much important things to discuss. Now to the House of Delegates. Delegate Joe Lindsey. You unmute yourself, Joe.
Charlie, happy to be with the group here today. I will tell you that these are unprecedented times, and we've got some real challenges on all fronts. We've got the social issues that are dictating much of the discussion this General Assembly session and the special session as it relates to criminal justice reform, and also as it relates to reining in some bad actors that have made it very problematic in terms of how law enforcement do their job. We also have matters as it relates to how this budget is going to be impacted by the pandemic and the needs that we have, both in terms of looking at some reform and looking at making sure that education continues to be in the forefront of our consideration. I think that the special session is going to be focused on re-benchmarking as it relates to the budget, and some of our spending priorities, both allocated budget expenditures and unallocated expenditures. But I likewise think that we're not going to lose sight of what we need to do in the way of making people comfortable that simply because you are Black or brown, that you shouldn't be at risk if you just walk among persons of the community and go about your day to day. So it's going to be an interesting challenge. We've got a lot of good people there, Nancy Guy, Jay Jones, Senator Lionel Sproul, from this region, and I think that Alex Askew, I think we're ready to, for that challenge.
All right, and we'll hold the questions until after we hear from our delegates. Turn it over to Jay Jones.
Well, good morning, Charlie. Norfolk Dems. It's great to be with you guys. I'm just going to take a couple of seconds because I think what Joe Lindsey said was perfect in terms of summarizing where we are going. I want to take a moment to highlight what Congressman Scott said about this redistricting amendment. There are some real challenges with that, and I think we've got to understand that as we head towards November. You had a considerable amount of debate on that on the floor last year and this year, and some pretty powerful voices telling you about the deeply flawed nature of that measure. And I said it on the floor, and I'll say it to you guys again, and I'll say it every month until November. When you are putting things into the Constitution of Virginia, you have got to be damn sure that it is perfect, because you don't get a second bite at that apple. It is so hard to get there in the first place. And so when we have an opportunity to enshrine something in that Constitution, it has got to be perfect. And that amendment, in my opinion, is deeply flawed, and it's not perfect, because it might not impact us 2021, 2031, but this is a generational proposition, and we have to get it right. And so we have a chance to do something different, but this isn't the way to do it. And I hope that our elected officials and folks will take a deep look at it, because you owe it to not just yourself, but to the generations that come behind you. The second thing that I will say is that as we head into special session, understand that we are in a moment in this country's history and Virginia's history that we've never seen before. 401 years, we have operated under certain assumptions and certain systems, but we have a chance to start the conversation about how we change that, how we begin to turn the ship around in the middle of an ocean, to begin to figure out how we reorient ourselves. And so I want everyone on this call to know that we've got to think big and we've got to dream big, because we as a society have a chance to rise to this incredible moment. And I don't want to miss that moment. And so I don't want to hear people say, not everything's going to get done at special session. We've got to go and shoot for the stars. And so I want you guys all to continue to call our offices, to email us, to text us, and folks all across the state, because we might not get a chance like this again, right? We want to make sure that we are making Virginia a place that we can all be proud of, that we don't have a situation like George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. My fear is that we don't do something in special session, and then it happens in Virginia after the fact. And then we had the opportunity to do something we didn't. So I want everyone to understand where we are and how important this is, and to channel your energy and passions into making sure that everybody who has a chance to vote in August understands the stakes. So thank you guys so much, and I can't wait to see you guys in person again sometime soon.
All right. Thank you, Delegate. Nancy Guy, you got a few things to say?
It's always tough batting cleanup behind those two. We are going into special session on August 18th. I agree with Jay that this is a moment in history that we need to seize. We have hearings, that the third of 3 public hearings by the Joint Public Safety and Courts and Justice Committees will be this week. I urge everybody to get on if they have some questions or something they want to say about what specific legislation should be going forward. We have 19 working committees that have been assigned that are developing the legislation moving forward on both the issues of policing reform and criminal justice reform. This is a broader issue than just police officers kneeling on the necks of a black man in Minneapolis. It is a broader issue in that we lock up too many people. We disproportionately lock up people of color. We lock them up for too long. We don't do enough for them while they're in jail, and we don't do anything for them when they get out. 1 in 4 people on the planet who lives behind bars lives in the land of the free. I want that to sink in. We have 4.4% of the population and 25% of the world's incarcerated people. 1 in 4, and 1 in 3 women who live behind bars live in the United States of America. It is a systemic, enormous problem, and we have an opportunity now that the public's focused on it to make real systemic change, and I hope we're going to seize that opportunity.
You know, it just, as you gave that statistic, it jumped out at me. You know, that same statistic applies to worldwide COVID deaths, 4% and 25%. So I don't know if there's something in that coincidence. Any questions for our House of Delegates folks? I know it's going to be an exciting special session. Speak now, forever hold your peace. Wow, see, you guys do such a great job. Hold it. Megan, got one. Okay, Megan. Did you unmute yourself?
There we go.
There we go.
If you guys could talk a little bit about the changes in absentee voting and voting procedures that were passed in the last session, that would be helpful, because I know there've been a lot of changes and not everyone is up to date on them.
I think Joe Lindsey, as the chairman of Privileges and Elections, should take that ball.
second what Nancy said.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate taking the lead on this one. What we've done is try to make the polls, more accessible to those of us who are interested in voting. The issue of voter identification has now been changed, where as opposed to you're having specific identification that hadn't expired, now you can even go without identification if you can, if you are willing to sign off on an affidavit that puts you at risk of being charged with perjury, but an affidavit that will say that you are who you maintain you are. I will tell you from the onset, that never was a problem. Voter fraud never was a problem. Statistically speaking, it never was a problem. And and this is an opportunity where many of our senior citizens who don't have the identifications and the driver's license because they've stopped aren't now permitted or having a barrier put before them as far as getting to the polls. We also are taking great steps as it relates to being able to do our casting of our absentee ballots. Many of the restrictions of the past are gone. You no longer have to contrive a reason why you need to vote absentee. You can vote absentee, without having to jump over that hurdle. So that's another one of the great changes that came through this past legislative session.
Thank you, Delegate Carrie Buchanan.
Yes, I know that some of the legislators are adamantly opposed. Jay has definitely said he's adamantly opposed to the constitutional.
So is Joe Lindsey.
So is Joe Lindsey on the redistricting amendment, but I need to know that what are you going to propose to do in this next coming one? Because right now, as it stands, and the legislators and only the legislators will be selecting their own boundaries, basically. The criteria's bills were not adopted at all. So I have some very big concerns that's going to say that people will, what is going to be done in the redistricting will be just as flawed as it's been in the past, and it'll be another 10 years of lawsuits.
Joe, you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
Charlie, I agree with her. Wholeheartedly, I agree. This is a shell game that has been perpetrated on the citizens of the Commonwealth. It's a fraud. We say that it's bipartisan redistricting. I'm sorry, we say it's nonpartisan redistricting, but it's anything but. The way that the plan is structured, you have a situation where you've got 2 senators, 2 delegates, on this committee with the citizens that are brought in, and and the other appointees, but we have designed within the plan the ability to create a log jam, and as Congressman Scott alluded to earlier, that's very problematic when the end result is that it's going to be bounced to the Supreme Court. And I mentioned our state Supreme Court has done nothing in the way of its rulings that has been consistent with moving things along for nonpartisan redistricting. We're told that this is a nonpartisan plan. It's not. It's anything but. It's bipartisan, purely bipartisan, and it does not change the narrative. It's a situation where electeds are still choosing its boundaries rather than the constituent base choosing its electorates.
And Carrie, I will also say that, and I agree with everything that Joe said, and I'll also say that because of COVID, it actually has given us a second bite at the apple from a legislative standpoint, because the delayed reporting of the census means that we are probably gonna have to run under the same lines in 2021 and run under new lines in 2022, which gives us a chance to redraw lines under a different system that may or may not be that amendment. And so, one, you have to sort of go on faith that we as legislators will do what you want us to do. And I think every single one of us who has ever stood in front of this committee has said, we want nonpartisan and independent redistricting. And what Joe just said is absolutely right. The plan isn't that. And you can't settle for a half measure when you're talking about redistricting, when you're talking about the representation of the people. And it's so often in the legislature, they say, well, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. Don't let your passions get in the way of getting some good legislation. This isn't legislation. This is an amendment. This is in the Constitution. Do you know what's still in the Constitution of Virginia? Gay marriage. Even though that's not the law of the land, it's still there. And I challenge you to find 51 votes to get that out 2 years in a row. It'll be incredibly hard because people will get spooked. And so I know that we are passionate about this. I know that we want reform, and there's a way to do it. And frankly, this isn't. And if you go back and watch those debates, which I think you probably did, but if you haven't, I would encourage you guys all to go back and watch the debates. There were some incredible points made, and I think the stakes are so high. And I think even the advocates who were pushing for this amendment acknowledge that this isn't what they wanted. And for me, that's terrifying to think about, because once you put it in, it's hard to take it out. There will be some, I think, gamesmanship and partisan gamesmanship in this process, and that's not what we want. And my promise to you guys has always been nonpartisan and independent. And I couldn't sit there in good faith and vote for that stuff, knowing that that wasn't what we all want and what we all need, especially when you've got communities of color that are, have been sort of assaulted in terms of being disenfranchised. And there is a chance that this could happen again and again and again.
Yeah, Charlie, there's another thing that needs to be said, and that you were given two choices. There are other choices other than status quo and constitutional amendment. The other is defeat the constitutional amendment and create a commission by statute. One that is a citizen commission, not loaded up with legislators who have veto authority over the thing, but real legislators. And they can come up with a plan. Then you can see how it actually works. So the idea that you would have the General Assembly status quo doing it as usual is not the only option. You can have, and Ralph Northam indicated when he was running that he would not sign a redistricting plan that didn't come out of a commission. We'll give him a commission, a citizen commission, not one. But this thing where Republicans who are now in the minority in the House and the Senate and the governor's office can configure a scheme where they can get the Republican-led Supreme Court without any standards to draw the lines, and what you see is what you get, is absolutely absurd. And I meant it when I said the House of Delegates plan. They come in, here's our plan. If y'all don't like it, the Supreme Court's drawing the lines, and just walk out.
Right.
I mean, what is that? That's not a citizen's plan. You got 14-2 for a fair plan, and the 2 says no, we're not going for it. We're going to go for our plan, or we're going to argue it to the Supreme Court. That is absolutely absurd for the minority to have that kind of power over a plan. But you can still have a commission. You don't need a constitutional amendment to have a commission. You just draw a statute.
So we can sit there and end up having some real legislative changes in our process before the census comes out.
Absolutely. And
they could do that either in the special session or in the regular session. With the constitutional amendment pending, it's kind of hard to do it before November. But at the beginning of the session in January, if it's defeated, they can pass a bill that sets up a commission that establishes 16 citizens that will go about the business of drawing the lines, and that can be done. And you would have a citizen commission doing it, not the legislators.
And look, this is the last thing I'll say about it, because I get really passionate, and Carrie, you and Megan and I have had real long talks about this. For 2 decades, you had Democrats putting in proposals to reform this process. And every single time, Republicans voted it down in committee, right, on voice votes, in subcommittee at 7 o'clock in the morning, every single time. It is no coincidence that at the end of this decade, as we beat them, right, under maps that they drew, right, in 2017, and then beat them again in 2019, that they said, oh my gosh, we've got to save our hides. And they acknowledged that. I mean, and I think I called them out on the floor. There were people who were still in that chamber who voted to kill these proposals and then turned around and voted for this 2 years in a row, all 51 of them 2 years ago and 45 of them this time. That's got to be a red flag. And as a Democrat, I can't sit idly by and watch that happen and then see some of my colleagues who I think want to stand on these sort of moral soapboxes about this process, while you're ignoring, a lot of deep concerns. And frankly, we owe it to ourselves and I owe it to my children and their children, hopefully, that the process is fair. And, you know, frankly, I just don't trust those guys. And to see them all sit there willingly and say, hey, look, this is a great idea, was the biggest red flag, and it was all I need. They are not our friends. They don't have our interests at heart. And so I can't take sitting by, idly by, and going along with the stuff that they're putting up. That's me.
I want to chime in as the newcomer. You know, I came in thinking it was going to be all that and was convinced by my friends, Jay Jones and Joe Lindsey, to oppose the constitutional amendment. I think it's very telling that the Black Caucus was united in its opposition to it. And I think given the death of Congressman Lewis this week, it really causes us to focus on the impact of what we do in crafting our districts as it impacts communities of color, because the people who have been most damaged by the gerrymandering process stood up en masse and said this process that is being proposed is unfair and will not protect us. And to me, that was the nail in the coffin in terms of my support for the amendment as it's written. And I think another huge red flag, not just the united support of the Republican caucus for the amendment, but also the united opposition of the Republican caucus for the enabling legislation and the guardrails and the specific anti-gerrymandering statute that was brought forth by Congressman Scott's niece, Delegate Price, was a huge red flag that they don't really want this to be fair. They don't really want us to have proposals in place that are going to prevent the things that have historically occurred. All they want to do is maintain their place at the table as a minority party going forward so that they can continue to try to control the process even when they don't control the legislature. So I voted against it on the floor. I'm going to vote against it again in November, and I urge everybody on this call to do likewise. We can do better, and we will.
Well, thank you, delegates. What I'm going to do now, turn it over at the city level. Before I get Andria McClellan to talk about things at the city, I have launched the vice presidential preference poll. If you want to play along, it should be up there somewhere. Feel free to vote somewhere along the way. And while we're voting,
I want to know how Congressman Scott's going to vote on this poll.
I was going to ask you if you can vote for more than one.
It's an anonymous poll, so you have that going for you. But anyway, Councilwoman McClellan.
Hey, Charlie. Good morning, everybody. And my
Good morning.
apologies. I'm getting two different kids ready for college. So I've been to Target already this morning, and it's a little nutso here. I wanted to just mention two things that are happening at the council level. One, we have named the members of the Mayor's Commission on Social Equity and Economic Opportunity, and we anticipate the first meeting of that to happen in September. So I'm looking forward to that, working with the mayor as the vice chair there. And secondly, we have seen a draft of a potential ordinance that would allow us to implement the legislation that I believe Delegate Jones, this is your legislation that would allow the city to prohibit firearms in areas where city business is being taken care of. So we anticipate that. I don't know if that's going to be at the end of August or September meeting, but we are moving that forward as well. So a couple of things there. I would just continue to encourage everybody, please wear your masks. I know I'm speaking to the choir, preaching to the choir on this call, but we are trying to bring our positivity rates down. We are on a downward trend now, but we need to do better. And so the mayor has been working with the city manager and public health director on that. So please do that. And then a point of personal privilege, I would encourage you, if you have not yet done so, go to accessforvirginia.com. I announced last week that I'm exploring a run for lieutenant governor in 21, and I've launched a PAC called Access for Virginia. And at another time, we can talk a little bit more about that. I can take any questions anybody might have about city council, or I will turn it back over to Charlie, and I look forward to the results of that poll.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody have a question on the city? And there's still 13 people that need to vote. So let's get 100% turnout here.
We have Carlos Clanton on from the school board.
Oh, okay. If there's no questions for Andria, Carlos, want to update things on the schools?
Good morning, everybody. Speaking as a school board member, as you know, we have a different protocol, so I'm not speaking on behalf of the entire board, but I'll tell you of actions that have actually taken place. You know that the board met, and all the things that Congressman Scott mentioned were all taken into consideration in our vote, and that was to start our school year, which is led, and several other school divisions have followed, that will, for the first 9 weeks, conduct school virtually, online. I did get a parent who actually, on the phone, people texting because there was an email that just came out. The school division is offering a year-long virtual program for parents who do not want to send their kids back to school this year. So there is an option for them to be able to take care of that. We will continue, like we said, after the first 9 weeks to monitor. And what Councilwoman McClellan mentioned, you look at the positivity rates. Our governor mentioned it this week in his announcement on Tuesday. There's no way that you could send kids back into an environment, and even Congressman Scott mentioned it. You think about 2,000 high school students who are going back and forth each and every day. So we put safety and security of our students and our staff first, and we'll continue to go back after the first 9 weeks. Will be sometime at the end of October, first part of November, where we'll revisit that. Also, the board has adopted equity. We're definitely doing training all year long. The board approved an equity policy back in 2015. We've got some different trainers that are coming in, but we're approaching this year as a collective group to review our policies, our protocols through an equity lens. And so I've been assigned to the policy committee along with Tanya Basine this year. And I look forward to reviewing a lot of those different items and bringing forth some proposals for changes before our colleagues on the board. And the last item that I'll mention is that, which has gotten a lot of press, is about the renaming of schools. The board, in a consensus vote, has said that they would like to move forward to looking at some type of decision on that. Those 3 schools that were in question, of course, was Maury High School, my alma mater, W.H. Taylor Elementary School, which I also attended, and Ruffner Academy. But we also identified that there are several other schools within the city that have connections with slavery. But we will not take up any action on that until probably October. The board has agreed to send it to the policy committee to review because we currently do have a naming policy. And in order for it to be named after an individual, that individual has to be deceased for at least 10 years. But there is a general consensus on the board really not to name buildings. Norfolk has more buildings named after people than any other school division. So that's primarily all that I have down there, and I'll definitely take up any questions.
Accept my apologies for not introducing you at the top of the call, so I apologize for that.
Okay.
Any school board questions?
Hey, Charlie, could I just add real quickly about hurricane prep? I don't know if you all covered that at all, but there is a state of emergency for the Commonwealth, and the city manager is working with all of our crews right now for hurricane prep. So please stay tuned to social media. I'll be posting, as will my colleagues, on garage openings, emergency shelters, etc. But we do anticipate some element of Isaias, I believe is how you pronounce that hurricane, and some tropical storm or low-grade hurricane on Monday in Norfolk.
Very good. And, you know, besides being so proud of all the elected officials Norfolk has at all levels of government, we have a fantastic emergency preparedness team at the city of Norfolk with Jim Raddick. So we're in good hands. But thanks for bringing that up. Daun, Hester, you have anything you want to bring it? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the polling. If Daun comes up here and we can share the results for everyone. Daun, you have anything you want to add?
Just to let everybody know that taxes, that today is the last day with no penalty or interest. Penalty or interest will be added tomorrow. So if you know anyone out there who still does not pay their taxes, real estate, business, or personal property, try to get it in today. No penalty and interest has been added. And the city council, of course, as you know, extended that option for our citizens. So just wanted to let you all know that. And hopefully by November, you will be able to opt in to e-billing. We have selected a company to do that for us, trying to reduce our mailings and provide you the opportunity to have a better experience paying taxes online. Hope everyone stays well and stays healthy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. As you can see, the results of the poll, Kamala Harris at 39% and Susan Rice at 25%. And Elizabeth Warren and Stacey Abrams tied at 11%, 5 votes each, and 3 for others. So looks like we are representative of some of the folks in the chattering class of politics coming out of DC. We have nothing but great candidates, and Joe Biden will do well no matter who he chooses there. But all right, are there any other final comments before we end this call? Like I said, I apologize, we're running late, but we have so many great speakers, it's bound to happen. All right, well, with that, thank you very, very much. Yes.
Charlie, I do want to announce, and this may interest a lot of our Democrats, there's an upcoming event at the Smart Mouth Brewery. They will be introducing their new brew, Susan B. Voting, on August the 22nd. It's in commemoration of the 100th centennial anniversary of the
amendment, right?
Yes, Susan B. Voting, and the time is from 3 to 10 p.m. I will be there with voter registration from 3 to 7. So if you want to come out to Smart Mouth Brewery to try the new hop, please come out and join me for that. And I've gotten a lot of requests for voter registration at some of the protests. I personally won't be doing any, but Motherboard is interested in doing voter registration at protests. So if you have any upcoming events, contact me and I will get that information out to the committee.
Yeah, please do. I think we got an email from the state party that we are short of our voter registration targets statewide or Commonwealth.
Yes.
Wide. So we really need to figure out new ways to find people to get them registered since our traditional ways have been blocked quite a bit.
Well, we're encouraging everybody to vote early. You can request your ballots now. You won't receive it until September 18th. So go ahead and request your absentee ballot now.
Yep. Was that Barbara?
No. Hey, Charlie, this is Carolyn. Marianne has had her hand up for a bit. So
it didn't pop up. Oh, yes. Okay. Well, Marianne, what you got?
Wondering about local eviction bans. I heard that in Northern Virginia, they've done a local eviction ban, and I was wondering if it was possible. So this is a question to Andrea, but also just wanted to thank Mr. Clanton and the school board for the first 9 weeks of virtual. You know, I just think it would not be a good idea to send kids in. So thank you for that.
Charlie, we don't have a ban at the local level at this point. The mayor has not brought one forward, or the city manager. I've had a handful of questions related to evictions, though. It is definitely something that we should be concerned of. I know that we have funneled a portion of our CARES Act money towards helping renters and also helping organizations that are helping renters, such as For Kids. I think there's 2 other organizations as well. Somewhere in the, I think we have about $2 million specifically allotted for eviction assistance. So we do not have a ban in place at the local level, but we do have funds available to help those who are in need and organizations who are helping those in need.
All right, very good. All right, trying times. All right, well, with that said, thanks everybody for being on the call. We have our committee meeting coming up 3rd Wednesday. I should have that date in front of me, but I don't. So, and again, feel free to, for our current committee, for our guests, feel free to join our committee. We'd love your involvement in our committee, and for our current members, try and recruit a new member for the upcoming meeting. So with that said, thanks everybody. It was a great call. Well spent 90 minutes, even though we're a little bit over. And we will see you around soon. Thanks everybody. Stay safe.
Thanks.
Take care.